Cartier City Expats Club is a non-profit social organisation and our speakers are volunteers. The club as such assumes no responsibility or liability for the professional reputation of or the quality of services provided by the speaker today. Because we are only allowed 6 people per table, so there's that to deal with. And they also, very important, need to know how many people are coming for breakfast. Now, I think everybody will agree that service today was well below what we experienced when we had our first meeting here. And I know 1, if not 2 people who never even got their breakfast. We're going back to using the registration app, which has been adapted. You either hit the button that says you're coming for breakfast in the meeting, or you hit the button that says you're just coming to the meeting. It's preferable if you do it before 5 o'clock on Monday, because I have to pass that information to the Holiday Inn. And I'm not always available to do it first thing Tuesday morning, which is when I get it to them. They've got to go out and do the extra shopping. Remember, they haven't got that many people staying here. They don't have the vast quantities of food that they would have previously had. And Darryl will obviously put this in the newsletter again, but I know many people, I'm one of them, I don't read the newsletter straight away, it's very bad of me, but I know, roughly speaking, what's going to be in there. People were emailing me this morning, people have just turned up today, which is lovely. It's great to see you all. We're only allowed 70 people in here. And if 80 people turn up, we're going to have to turn away 10 people. And we will ask the people who haven't signed up, or the people who signed in late, they'll be the ones that'll be told, sorry, there's no room at the inn. Please get the word out to people, because they're not taking notice of what's in the newsletter or on the website or on the Facebook page. And it's the easiest way is for us to use that app. You will be able to book in. Darryl, remind me, I forgot to look. Have we got next week's meeting enabled yet on the app? Can you remember? No, neither can I. We'll get it enabled as soon as possible. We'll have it up and running by tomorrow. Yeah, we can get it up and running for tomorrow. So you can start registering when you want. If you register and then something happens that you can't turn up, it's not the end of the world. It's only going to be a few people who do that. But please, we don't want to turn anyone away. Okay? Thank you.
Yes, Judith has an unenviable job. Obviously, the last thing she wants to in this town at this time, and a little inconvenience like registration, well, we can live with that. So, today's primary speaker, Barry Jones, on a very, very fundamentally important topic, diabetes 2. I gave a talk where I pointed out that I think the death rate from diabetes 2 in Thailand's over 4% of deaths are from diabetes 2. And about 2.5% of deaths in America are from diabetes 2, and goodness knows how many subsidiary comorbidity things there are as well. So he's going to take us through his personal journey through this personal journey he's been through with diabetes, and he's done a lot of courses on it. He's taken this very seriously. He's educated himself so that he could heal himself and take control of his health, as many of us have done in this room, or some of us have done in this room. So welcome, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Okay, this is Diabetes 101, and as you can see, it's a fact. There's never been a single case where type 2 diabetes has been cured by conventional medicine intervention. However, some natural methods have proven successful. Now, not to be boastful, Is it all right if I stand on by here? I can't remember every word. Not to be boastful, these are some of the things I've done. Studies show that the focus on nutritional education within the medical profession is inadequate. It is very inadequate. And consequently results in health practitioners being ill-equipped and uninformed to provide sound nutritional advice to patients. That's from the American Journal of Medicine, November 2017. A medical doctor receives, on average, 4 hours tuition on nutrition in the 4 years in med school. I have received over 50 hours of tuition and over 1,000 hours of self-study and research. Some of the research I did was not from medical books or videos. I did an informal study on anthropology. Anthropology studies how humankind evolved and what they evolved to eat. And believe me, we have got it wrong. Not to be boastful, here's some of the awards I've managed to achieve. I have a diploma in clinical nutrition with distinction from Stonebridge Associated College, diploma as a keto diet advisor, again with distinction from a source called Udemy, diploma in intermittent fasting, certificate in how to reverse type 2 diabetes, certificate in evidence-based optimal nutrition from Harvard School of Public Health, that's part of Harvard University, and I have a certificate in a matter of fat from the British Nutritional Foundation. And I've also got statements of participation from Open Learn, which is part of Open University. As you can see, the science of nutrition and healthy eating, diabetes complications, understanding cardiovascular disease, vitamins, minerals, obesity, balanced diets and treatments, proteins, health, and the environment. Now, it looks like I'm being very boastful, but I wanted to show you that I've gone to a number of sources to look for the information, and I have only accepted proven scientific fact. I don't accept opinion. If somebody tells me, well, I went on such and such a diet and it's marvelous, I don't accept that. I want evidence. This is a situation in America. 65% of people are pre-diabetic or diabetic. Diabetes type 2 has spiked over 400% in the 80s. 4 billion prescriptions given yearly, $3.4 trillion to the cost of the US healthcare system. In the UK, pretty much the same, 1.5 million pounds sterling per hour. That's 10% of the National Health Service's total budget. So, if I ask you the question, what is diabetes? Many of you will say high blood sugar. That's wrong. That's not diabetes. That is a symptom of diabetes. High blood sugar is a symptom of diabetes. It is not the root cause. So let's look at some people who have diabetes, and well, there's two basic types. There is a third type which I won't go into because it's not all so clear. Type 1 diabetes is lack of insulin production. You are dependent on insulin as a medication for the rest of your life. There's no cure. On the other hand, you might find it hard to believe, but type 2 diabetes means you have full pancreatic sufficiency. You are non-insulin dependent. You don't need medication. I can see all of you looking in great disbelief. All right? It's hard to believe, but it's true. A person is non-dependent. That's a medical statement for type 2 diabetes, by the way. There's a possibility of reversal. I say a possibility because if you've damaged the beta cells of your pancreas, you may not be able to reverse it. But normally you can. There's a doctor in America, he's about 98% success rate, Dr. Jason Fung. Now, I was taught that diabetes is that the body cells cannot take up the blood sugar. The cells are deficient, and I want you to look at that word, deficient, in sugar while the blood was in excess. Now it's worth saying again, it was thought that there was a situation where the body cells are deficient in sugar and where the blood sugar is high. Well, what happens when you eat? Everything you eat will stimulate insulin production, carbohydrates. I'm going to say hydrocarbons because I used to work in the oil industry. Carbohydrates especially, right, they will raise you, spike your blood sugar. Protein to a lesser degree, fat minimal. So when you eat, insulin secreted, nutrients not needed for your immediate energy are stored as glycogen in your liver and in your tissues. Any excess is metabolized by the liver into fat. So the glucose, which is blood sugar, is converted to fat when you're in the fed state. When you go to bed, fat is taken from your fat cells to the liver and converted to glucose. And that is why you don't die every night. So this is how the process works. You've got insulin, you've got sugar, glucose, you've got a body cell, it has an insulin receptor and a glucose channel. So once the insulin contacts receptors on the cell, it opens the glucose channel and glucose goes into the cell. That's how it works. In other words, insulin is a key to open the cell door and allows glucose and other nutrients to enter the cell, and in the medical profession, it's referred to as the lock and key mechanism. Now this is worth looking at in some detail. It's very difficult for you to see down there. But this is the situation on a healthy person. You've got glucose from the dietary tract and you've got insulin from the pancreas. Just for ease of explanation, let's say it takes 1 molecule of insulin for 1 molecule of sugar. Let's just make it simple. So that goes into the liver and to your muscular tissues, and you have normal sugar levels in your blood. Everything's hunky-dory. Now with the diabetic, this is how the medical profession looks at it. You need more insulin to do less work, or more insulin to do the same level of work. They're trying to force more glucose into the cell to reduce your blood sugar. That gives us a problem because high insulin can cause arterial inflammation, atherosclerosis, cardiovascular disease, and we know it causes type 2 diabetes. We now have too much insulin and too much sugar in the blood. The pancreas at this time may be at maximum output. So what does your doctor do? He or she prescribes more insulin. He or she is treating the symptom and not the cause. That is the same as giving whiskey to an alcoholic to treat his alcoholism. Think about it. It's now thought, but not by all of the medical profession, that the conventional theory is incorrect. Conventional theory states that the blood sugar glucose is high because glucose cannot get into the cells. Well, that's type 1 diabetes. However, even with a diabetic, glucose is processed by the liver into fat and stored in the fat cells. This is evident by an increase in weight. And this is something else that the medical profession's got wrong. They say if you're obese, you can be a diabetic. If you're a diabetic, you can become obese. Because the function of insulin, it has 2 main functions. It has a lot more actually, but it has 2 main functions. One is to take glucose into the cells. The other is to take excessive glucose to the liver and convert into fat, so you put on weight. So being a type 2 diabetic can lead, usually does, to weight gain. So the liver is made of cells just like the body. So how does, if we cannot get sugar into our cells, how do we get it into the liver for it to be converted into fat? So the 2 main functions, we increase glucose entry into the cells, but we're saying we're resistant. We turn on lipogenesis, but now we're super sensitive. How can our cells be super sensitive and resistant at the same time? Hardly so. So what is going on? Well, this is an adipocyte. It is a fat cell. Looking at it, you can see these little peg things here. That is the insulin receptor, or receptors. A normal cell, cells increasing in weight. Now here we have a very large cell full of fat, in this case, and it is stretched. If you think of a balloon, and you blow it up to a certain size and draw 2 dots on it, and inflate it even more, what happens to the dots? They move apart. And that is the same as the insulin receptors. They move further apart. So now the insulin cannot contact the receptors. It takes more than one receptor to have made contact. So this is now the onset of diabetes. Now, that would mean that the conventional theory is wrong. Because if you look at this, this is a normal cell. We got glucose on the outside, and we have glucose on the inside, and everything is fine. Conventional thinking is the internal starvation paradigm. Lots of sugar in the blood, but very little in the cell. This Dr. Jason Fung, he's saying we got lots of sugar in our blood and in the cell. We have an overflow paradigm. So we're trying to get more sugar into a cell that's already full. We're now in a position where there's high glucose and high insulin in the blood and also in the cells. Every part of our body has been subjected to high levels of insulin and glucose, causing inflammation and damage in the body. This begs the question, is prescribing insulin and metformin the correct treatment? Would you give whiskey to an alcoholic? So let's now compare the bodies of someone with type 2 diabetes with someone with type 1. This young lady was a type 1 diabetic before the age of insulin. On the right, insulin was discovered and she recovered and leads quite a normal life. She had the internal starvation paradigm. And this is what the medical profession says about type 2 diabetes. So what is happening to her? Well, the human body evolved to absorb food, put on fat, right? Store energy in our as glycogen in our muscles and in our liver. So when you fast, initially you live off glycogen. That provides you energy. It's immediate use. I'm waving my arm about here, and that means I'm burning glycogen. Glycogen is glucose and water molecule. Secondly, once all the glycogen stores are depleted, which takes about roughly 16 hours to the average person, you start burning fat. So what happens when your fat is depleted? Fat is on your body is meant to be a storage, a reserve fuel tank. So what happens when the fat is depleted? The body starts consuming protein, converting protein, what your cells are made of, into glucose in order to survive. Now this is a caveman thing where the body is striving to survive a famine. Yeah? Before insulin, type 1 diabetes is called severe malnourishment. Now you can see that unfortunate lady there is really no meat on her at all. You have never seen a type 2 diabetic looking like this, and you never will. They look like that. Oh, my shape. He has what is now referred to as the overflow paradigm. This man has an overflow of glucose from his liver. Now what happens there is that because you need insulin injections or metformin or whatever, right? You've got so much insulin, it's trying to put the sugar somewhere. to take it out of the blood. Now it has to go somewhere. It doesn't evaporate. So where does it go? Into your fat cells. What happens when they start to fill up? Well, the liver overflows and spills out fat, because it's made the glucose into fat. It spills out into visceral fat, which is the very dangerous kind. And that goes around all your internal organs, giving you all sorts of diseases, which if you get more than one at the same time is referred to as metabolic syndrome. You may have heard of that. So this is from the Mayo Clinic. The liver takes glucose, sends it out as energy, excess as fat. So insulin resistance is an overflow phenomenon. It means the cells are full and resistant to insulin. Remember, the cells now have expanded and you cannot contact the insulin receptors. So you cannot take up nutrients. The nutrients are sent to the liver, fill the liver. The liver can be thought to overflow, spilling out the glucose, which now is metabolized into fat, becoming visceral fat around the internal organs. This overflow is also sent to the fat cells, resulting in fatty liver, fatty pancreas, and overweight or obesity. This is how Dr. Jason Fung explains it. If you think of this train carriage as your body's cells, if you think of the people on the platform as glucose, and these attendants as insulin. So the insulin is trying to get the glucose into the cell. Now you can see that these gentlemen are having a hard time getting the sugar into the cell. So what do our medical profession do? They bring along another attendant, more insulin, to get that sugar into the cell. So what happens when all this sugar now is filling up your cells? Well, many diabetics get leg ulceration, leg amputations. Their lifespan is greatly reduced. The sugar goes somewhere. High insulin levels and sugar cause so many problems. So this brings us back. What if these cells are already full? All right. If glucose cannot enter the liver, how does it continue producing new fat via de novo lipogenesis, which is the production of fat? This is a very interesting slide because it explains I think quite simply. This is a normal level. That is from what they call the control group, people who are not given insulin. This is the amount of insulin sugar in your blood. This is millimoles per liter. Normal levels around 5.4. That's about the average level. Now it takes about 14 years on average for a person to become fully diabetic. You have a problem for years and you don't know about it. There's nothing to tell you that you're becoming diabetic. So after a while, you're 12, you're minus 12, your insulin levels now, instead of being 5.4, it's now 5.45. But the pancreas produces sufficient insulin to control that within an acceptable limit. Come down to year 6, for instance, and we're roughly about 5.6 or something like that. And your pancreas is still coping. Your pancreas is always working. It's working. Now it comes to a point where the pancreas produces as much insulin as it possibly can, but your sugar levels are still rising. So that's when you are a true diabetic. All right? The pancreas are able to keep up until they don't usually fail for a very long time, but what happens with your pancreas is that it becomes clogged with fat as well. Now, if you have a fat belly, but otherwise skinny, then you're likely to have visceral fat around your organs and a fatty liver. This will put you at high risk of cardiovascular disease and or type 2 diabetes. If you look like this, you're likely to be a pre-diabetic at the very least. This is often referred to as skinny fat, because the fat is on the inside. It's not on your belly like mine. It's around your internal organs, and that inhibits how these organs work. Puts a hell of a strain on the heart. Now, I study nutrition as a hobby. I'm a lowly level 5 on the academic scale. That's on the European educational framework. A doctor is level 8. Remember, he only has about 4 hours tuition on average. Now, if I can understand this new paradigm, why doesn't the medical profession? It's evident that they do not, as they keep pumping insulin into people. Well, you can't just blame the doctors. They have to follow a particular protocol. And who dictates this protocol? Big Pharma. World Health Organization. Big Pharma is profit-driven, not health-driven. Healthy people do not make them money. Lies, sex, and videotapes. Sorry, no porn here, but these are the lies that they tell you. What if I paid Congress to allow us to slaughter hundreds of thousands of Americans? Been there, done that. That's exactly what is happening to people. Big Pharma, FDA. Do you know where the FDA came from? Do you know where the World Health Organization came from? Big Pharma. They pay for it all. They're in the pockets of Big Pharma. Doctors and hospitals are in the pockets of Big Pharma. Big Pharma will come along to a hospital and say, oh, we'll build you a new wing and we get you all the latest equipment, but you must sell our drugs. They take a doctor. Oh, you can come to Bermuda. Leave on Friday night. They arrive in Bermuda. Saturday morning, they have a round of golf. Saturday afternoon, they have a seminar, a couple of hours. Sunday morning, they have another round of golf. Sunday evening, they go home. All expenses paid by Big Pharma. Look at that. In 2006, $67 for a vial of insulin. 13 years later, $285. And the market is growing because more and more people are becoming diabetic. So they put the price up again. They're making huge profits. So, how to reverse it? It's quite simple, really. Don't put more in. You need a high-fat, low-carb diet. Basically, a keto diet, but not a full-blown keto diet. I'm a keto diet advisor, but I advise eating leafy cruciferous vegetables as well. I don't believe in being total carnivore. Burn it off. Intermittent fasting. Exercise. You have to get your insulin levels down. And that sounds counterintuitive. To reduce, you're a diabetic, and I'm telling you, you need to reduce your insulin. No processed food, no sugary drinks, and no alcohol. No alcohol. Okay, here's some of the things which is the function of insulin. Stores fat and prevents fat burning. If you have insulin in circulation around your body, right, you cannot release fat from the fat cell. Cannot release the fat from the fat cell. So the other thing it does, it blocks autophagy. We'll speak a little on that a little bit later. Here's some of the effects that high insulin levels can lead to. Heart disease, diabetes, fatty liver, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, aneurysms, strokes, dementia. Down the left here is some of the things which contribute to insulin elevation. You become insulin resistant, you get a fatty liver, you have hyperglycemia, become a pre-diabetic, you start to get metabolic syndrome, high blood pressure and all this. and you become a diabetic. You have to reduce your carbs. You really do. Because carbohydrates are sugars and starches. Starch is a form of a sugar. And all vegetables are carbohydrates. All fruit is a carbohydrate. If you're a diabetic, you shouldn't be eating pineapples and stuff like that because it's too much sugar. And it's a bad sugar. Right? It's called fructose, right? Which the body cannot use fructose. So it goes to the liver, and 100% of your consumption of fructose is converted to fat. Whereas sucrose, you can burn up. But fructose, the body cells cannot use it. They can only use glucose. So 100% of all the fruit that you eat, or all the fructose in the fruit that you eat, goes to make fat. So gorging on fruit does not really make you slimmer or lessen your problem if you're a diabetic. So how does one become insulin resistant? It's not just the consumption of sugar and sugary drinks, it's also high consumption of carbohydrates and processed food. You go to any supermarket that you care to name, and 60% of the floor space is given over to biscuits and cakes and other things like that, snacks. Because it's huge profits to be made up, because it's cheap to produce. They use high fructose corn syrup to sweeten all these things, and they use flour. We are not designed, our body's not designed to eat wheat. Right? Wheat has only been with us 10 to 12,000 years. That's when farming started to evolve. It takes millions of years for evolution to change the body. We are not designed to eat cakes and bread, but we do in huge quantities. So it can take years to develop where there's an increase in insulin in the blood, but sufficient is absorbed with the body's cells to keep the blood sugar level within range. After a while, the body cells become resistant to insulin, and then the problem starts. It all started about 1977 when you started to get these recommendations. It was all come about because Dwight Eisenhower had a heart attack and he was out of the Oval Office for about 16 days, which is a long time for an American president not to be in office. So they said, oh, increase your carbohydrates to about 55–60%, decrease fat consumption from 40 to 30%. There was a guy called Ansel Keys that said that. Now Ansel Keys was a bully. He was out to make a name for himself, right? And his science was poor. And for 45 years, we have been told not to eat fat. Well, something happened in 2015, which you probably never heard of because it didn't make mainstream news. But it's on the internet, on their websites. The FDA and the World Health Organization have both said there's no restriction on the amount of fat you can eat. But it's kept quiet because for 45 years they were saying the opposite. They want to inch this in slowly. There is no restriction on the amount of fat you can eat because there is no scientific evidence to say that fat and cholesterol causes heart disease. All your doctors are only repeating parrot fashion what the FDA and the World Health Organization told them. They said they had the science for it. Your doctor doesn't do the science. He just accepts the protocol given by Big Pharma. I found this absolutely amazing. And you will see my exclamation there. To control the amount and kind of fat, saturated fatty acids, and dietary cholesterol you eat, choose snacks from other food groups, such as low-fat cookies, low-fat crackers, unsalted pretzels, hard candy, gumdrops, sugar, syrup, honey, jam, jelly, marmalade, and spreads. Oh. That is American Heart Association which said that. How can you have any confidence in them? This is the American Dietary Administration or Association, whatever it's called. Eat refined grains. Well, what's a refined grain? Well, breakfast cereals, bread, cakes, biscuits. What happens with a refined grain is they take out the wheat germ, which is possibly the best part, and give us the rest. Now, this wheat germ is valuable. So what do they do with it? They feed cattle because it's good for building up muscle. But they don't give it to us. Protein, they say low fat and lean. It's a proven fact that fatty meat, it tastes better, right? And it is not as harmful as what people thought it was. Everything in life is harmful because we're all going to die eventually of something. Vegetables, yeah. I'm for green leafy vegetables, cruciferous vegetables. Root vegetables are not good. Root vegetables are very starchy. Starch is a sugar. V8, that's some kind of vegetable juice with preservatives in it and adding sugar to prolong its shelf life. Corn. Corn is one of the worst things you can eat. Right? And that's got preservatives and sugar to preserve its shelf life. Fruit then. Dried fruit. Now, if you eat a fig or something like that, it's very sweet. You dehydrate it, you dry it. Right? You remove the water, but you don't remove the sugar. But you've decreased the volume, so you eat more. Oranges, great. Orange juice in a bottle or a carton, you don't want to be touching that stuff. It has added sugar to preserve its shelf life. Fruit cocktail comes in a syrup. Why on earth would you eat that? But that's what the government is telling you to do. Here's the answer. So simple. Foods high in sugar stimulate insulin release. Lack of food inhibits insulin release. Isn't that a simple answer? Go back to this graph. Type 2 diabetes is a progressive complaint. It can take many years for the insulin levels to build up to a level where the beta cells of the pancreas fail. At this point, you're a true diabetic, and Big Pharma will have you believe that you will need medication for the rest of your life. It's a cash cow. These diabetic medications are a cash cow for Big Pharma. This slide is a few years old, but at the time it was cost $13,700 a year to the American healthcare system. 2.3 times more than it would have been in the absence of diabetes. The health services in America and the UK are collapsing. They don't have the money. In the UK, if you go to a hospital, and if you're a resident in the UK, treatment's free. Now, this is from the New England Journal of Medicine about a substance called rosiglitazone. Rosiglitazone. Isn't that a nightclub for ladyboys in Walking Street or something like that? Rosiglitazone? Anyway, this is in 2007. The effects of rosiglitazone on the risk of myocardial infarction and death from cardiovascular disease. Right, people taking it had 66% more heart attacks, 39% more strokes, 20% more deaths, 100,000 heart-related problems amongst the seniors. And I love this next statement. The manufacturers GlaxoSmithKline recently paid $3 billion to the FDA for its mischievous behavior. Mischievous behavior, they were killing people. Amazing. Now this is metformin or glucophage, right? This is an independent system which looks at medical things, PLOS, Medicare. Although metformin is considered the gold standard, its benefit-risk ratio remains uncertain. We cannot exclude a 25% reduction or a 31% increase in all-cause mortality. We cannot exclude a 33% reduction or a 64% increase in cardiovascular mortality. Well, what does that mean? It means there's a 31% grey area where they don't know. Now, would you take a medicine that had this 31% grey area? I certainly would. Oh, this is not a new thing. 1937, 1943, right? European Heart Journal. Long-term prognosis of diabetic patients with myocardial infarction, relation to anti-diabetic treatment regime. Diabetic patients treated with oral hypoglycemic agents or insulin, but not those treated with diet alone, have significantly increased mortality following acute myocardial infarction compared with non-diabetics. So people taking the medicine dying sooner. This guy Hockaday in 1987 said it's important to remember that diabetic control means a lot more than blood sugar control. Now he was talking about nutrition there, right? How to control things by nutrition. And he went on to say, medications, oral and insulin, effectively lower blood sugar levels, and the patients die sooner with better looking numbers. That's a Scandinavian Journal of Gastroenteral, it's a gastroenteral supplement, 1987. But the governments up until 2015 ignored all this. Hello? Oh. Oh, they got a new battery in here as well. Hanging on my leg. Well, it's working. Sorry about this. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Thank you. So what we got here is a list of medication for diabetics, and over here we got what the side effects are. Vitamin B12. Oh, I can take a supplement for that. That's not a problem. What other things we got? Oh, cardiac death, hip fractures, kidney failures, pancreatic cancers, fatal hepatic failure, and the list goes on. That's from diabetic medicines. We all know, well, I think we all know, the medical profession certainly knows that a person who is a diabetic is likely to have a reduced length of life, likely to have lower limb amputations. So what can we do? Well, reduce your intake of carbs and increase your fat intake. Do intermittent fasting and exercise. The benefits are weight loss, reduced risk of cardiovascular disease, reduced risk of type 2 diabetes, reduction in insulin and blood sugar levels, possibility of curing type 2 diabetes, improved hormonal balance, improvement in overall health. So this is the food triangle, which I've turned upside down. Well, not me, the person that wrote this. You need a lot of green vegetables. Good for vitamin K2, right, which moves the calcium around the body, because perhaps you don't know, but you need calcium to make your heart beat, not just for the bones. It plays a part in your rhythm of your heart. 70% of your energy needs should come from fat. Protein, 3 to 6 ounces per meal. About 20 grams of carbs. These are carbs, but they're not in there. That's typically other root vegetables and processed food. To lose weight, well, insulin will not let you use hormone-sensitive lipase, which is the main enzyme responsible for fat burning. So if you've got insulin in circulation, you cannot burn fat. So you have to come off burning sugar to burning fat. Fasting, Dr. Jason Fung, who is a nephrologist in America, he treats people, and he's got about 98% success rate of curing type 2 diabetes. Right? And if you're a diabetic, he does something which I think most diabetics would be a little bit scared about. He stops them, he makes them fast for 3 days. That brings the insulin levels right down. So you're not pushing the glucose into your tissues anymore, and you will burn up the glucose that is in circulation. Most of us are either burning sugar, not fat. If you're burning, most of us in sugar burning mode all the time. We never fully use up our sugar stores before we eat the next meal that is easily converted to sugar. Science has proved that fasting is very beneficial to good health. Some people are really scared about fasting because they say, if I lose fat, I lose muscle. Well, when you fast, it stimulates the production of the human growth hormone, which maintains your muscle mass. So you don't lose muscle until you've burned up all the fat, as you saw with that young lady. It leads to such effects as longevity, low risk of disease. Studies have shown that intermittent fasting reduces the markers of inflammation, such as C-reactive protein, tumor necrosis factor, I don't know all the rest, and it mentions leptin. I have leptin resistance. Leptin is a hormone produced by the body, and it's a satiety hormone, which says, I'm full, tells the brain, I'm full. Mine doesn't work too well, so my brain thinks I'm hungry all the time. Autophagy. Fasting stimulates autophagy. The body is very clever. It realizes there's no food coming in. So as your cells break down, it recycles parts of that cell, the protein. Protein that's already, if you lose weight and you get saggy skin, that saggy skin's protein. So your body will use that protein to manufacture new cells. It's a recycling thing. Recycling process allows the cell to stay alive during tough times. By recycling part of the cellular content, autophagy allows our body to cope with starvation and all types of stress. Autophagy begins when the liver glycogen is depleted, about 12 to 16 hours into a fast. It peaks there and then drops after about 2 days. Some of the benefits of autophagy: promotes blood sugar control by reducing insulin resistance, promotes better health by fighting inflammation, may enhance heart health by improving blood pressure, triglycerides and cholesterol, may boost brain function and prevent neurodegenerative disorders, aids weight loss by limiting calorie intake and boosts the metabolism, increases growth hormone secretion, which is vital for growth, metabolism, weight loss and muscle strength. Could delay aging and extend longevity. It may aid in cancer prevention and increase the effectiveness of chemotherapy. Now, that last statement, it is said that cancer feeds on sugar. Those people who minimal absorption of sugar, they are more likely to survive a cancer or not get it in the first place. That is the medical profession saying that. Much as information of this presentation have been gleaned from the following sources: Dr. Jason Fung and Dr. Eric Berg. This presentation would not have been possible without their data, a number of slides, and in fact their intellectual property. My opinion of Big Pharma may not be necessarily shared by Messrs. Fung and Berg. That's just my opinion. I would strongly recommend, if you're a diabetic, to get this book. It is a wealth of information, and he explains it quite simply. He is accredited as the world expert on diabetes. He's a nephrologist. He lives in America. He's Canadian, but he lives in America. Everybody got that? I have to mention this disclaimer, right, because I am not a doctor. The ideas, concepts, and opinions expressed in this presentation are intended to be used for educational purposes only. The information contained in this presentation should by no means be considered as a substitute for the advice of a qualified medical practitioner. A little bit more of that in the next slide. Who should always be consulted before beginning any new diet, exercise, or other health program. This presentation is not meant to be used, nor should it be used, to diagnose or treat any medical condition. For diagnosis or treatment of any medical problem, consult your own physician. The information in this presentation has been carefully researched, and all efforts have been made to ensure accuracy. The author receives no responsibility for any injuries suffered or damages or losses incurred during or as a result of following the exercise or diet program. Final thought. The third leading cause of death in the USA is what? Alzheimer's? Anybody else? No. COVID. Could be COVID, yeah, no. No. If you look at the medical information, it'll say respiratory problems, but it is actually the medical profession. If you look at the numbers, it's actually the medical profession. This is a study by Johns Hopkins, a very well-known university, very well thought of. 250,000 a year. So what's a medical error? Misdiagnosis, no diagnosis, no medicine, wrong medicine, whatever. No operation, wrong operation, all medical errors. Before I go, these are some of the things that I've produced over the time. Some of them are very informative. This one here, The Men Who Made Us Ill, which will tell you about the Big Pharma cartel. It's because it's a cartel. And this is the first slide from it. And this is about statins. I don't believe anybody needs a statin. Why? Well, Crestor, the makers of Lipitor, they said they've reduced heart attacks by 54%, strokes by 47%. Wow! A wonder drug, huh? An actual wonder drug. Well, if you look at the medical paper that comes with it, they took a group of people, divided them in two. Some had a placebo, some took a statin. And lo and behold, the people with the statin, lower levels of heart attack. So it looks like it works. So I said, where does this 54% come from? Well, in the placebo group, 0.76% had some kind of heart event, and in the starting group, 0.35 at a heart event, the difference being 0.41%. 0.41% is equal to 54% of that figure. That's what they call relative risk reduction. It's not actual risk. The actual risk is 0.41%. That's what it reduced the risk by. Now, statins come with a lot of side effects for many people. Would you take a medication knowing that there are side effects, possibly, from that medication, and the benefit risk reduction is less than 0.5%? I wouldn't. I wouldn't. Right? And the other lie that they made, statins do not stop you having a heart attack. They reduce the risk. Reducing the risk and having a heart attack is two different things. We all know the road out there is dangerous. And if you want to reduce the risk of getting knocked down, you wait till the road's clear before you cross. Then thereby you have reduced the risk. If somebody comes around a corner without you knowing, you hit. Same thing with the statin. Oh, we stopped again. Yep, that's it. Well, that's the last slide. The last slide is my contact details if you should wish to contact me. Nothing. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Have we got any questions for this very interesting subject? Put your hands up, please. Yeah. One here.
So about 25 years ago, a friend of mine who was a nurse at the VA in Seattle said to me that any of her patients losing weight never needed medications to control diabetes, which is kind of exactly what you're saying right now. The other thing, and I want to make sure I understand this, if you're telling me that a broccoli cheese casserole with extra cheese or a thin crust pizza with extra cheese and pepperoni is health food, I love you.
I'm afraid not. The broccoli is great. One of the best things you can eat as regards to vegetation, but pie crust, you can make a pie crust out of grated cauliflower. Yeah, that works. That's what I do.
Very good talk. I have a kidney problem, so I'm trying to control my proteins. What would be the best way for me to increase my fat daily intake? What foods should I eat?
The food you should be eating, eggs. Eggs are good. But fatty meat, like streaky bacon, is less harmful. This is my belief from my research. Anybody that knows anything at all about eating steak will always buy a marble steak because it's the fat that gives it the flavor, and you need fat to absorb the fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, and E. They are fat-soluble. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
Thanks for your talk. You lost 20 kilos. I didn't care anything about what you said about diabetes, but I want to lose 20 kilos. So you sort of touched on it in your presentation, but can you give us sort of a short rundown of how long it took you, what exactly you did? You did the fasting, what kind of food you ate, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I used to be 104 kilos. Now I'm about 84, 85. I lost a lot of weight about 2 years ago. I came right down. But I've been trying out different diets. And I arrived at a conclusion that diets do not work. Because The word diet infers that you're going to have a calorific reduction, or you're going to reduce your food intake. The problem with that is that as you lose weight, initially you lose it quite quickly, right? But then the body goes, if I keep going like this, I'm going to die. So it slows your metabolism down. It slows the metabolism, so you burn food more slowly. You feel like sherbet. You got no energy, right? And no sooner you start eating normal, because your metabolism's low, your absorption goes into overdrive, and you regain the weight you lost and more. There is, you think about the Weight Watchers, they never have a reunion. Why? Because they've all put weight back on. Never have a reunion. You've got to understand how the body works. And as I said earlier, what I found out how the body works is by studying anthropology, how humans evolved over the time, what they were eating at the time. Because our dietary tract is basically the same as a caveman. There's hardly any difference. So, you know, we're eating all these highly processed foods, which we are not designed to eat. Our body is not really designed to be a vegetarian, right? Because vegetables are sugar and starch, and our pancreas is only small. Right? Before we became humans as such, where your appendix is, right, that used to be a thing called a cecum, and that's where vegetation was fermented and when it was absorbed from. We now don't have that. We have this little leftover from it called your appendix. We are not, I firmly believe this, we are not designed to be specifically 100% meat eater or vegetarian. Answer your question?
Over here.
Well, you have to have a change in lifestyle. I lost weight by various diets, right? But then I'm putting it back on. So, but the best way to lose weight and keep it off, assuming you change what you're eating to healthy stuff, is by fasting. Because when you go to a fast, within 24 hours you've switched over from one fuel to another, right? And your metabolism doesn't slow down, because the fat that you were burning from your body is high in energy. Fat has 9 calories per gram. The protein has something like 4. Carbohydrates something like 4. Something like that. So you were burning a rich fuel, and I have fasted for about 3 or 4 days. No loss in energy. In fact, my energy's increased. After the first day, you, oh God, I would have to have something to eat. Your hunger depletes. You don't produce leptin, which is a satiety hormone, because your body is being nourished sufficiently by your fat stores.
Just a minute, please. Hang on, please. Through the mic. This man's next.
Thank you for your information. Was a very good motivation. I will give information, statement, and will end with a question. Information. Now I'm 71. Since I've been 35, I doing fasting, because a friend of mine told me he will do 14 days no eat and no drink alcohol, no wine and nothing. You cannot do it, he told me, and I did it. That was a beginning 35 years ago. Now my statement. You spoke about what governments are doing.
Okay.
What all the governments are doing we can see now because Corona. And I will end with a question. Have you ever heard something about dry fasting, or have you ever did it? Dry fasting means not eat and not drink any water or beer or something else. Only dry. Have you ever heard? Have you ever done?
I've heard of it, but I wouldn't recommend it. I would drink water. If you take a Muslim now, he goes all day without, in Ramadan, he goes all day without drinking or eating. He doesn't take water during the day, which I don't think is healthy, because your kidneys need a continuous flow all the time. They have to be working all the time. That's called a water fast. If you're going to fast, do a water fast. I wouldn't recommend dry fasting. I think that's because water has no calories. But drinking too much water can flush out a lot of nutrients, by the way, as well as any bad things. Drinking water to excess is not good. I wouldn't recommend it. I think it would damage your kidneys.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, okay, thanks for your presentation. I'm not here to take sides or what's right or wrong. I've got no medical experience whatsoever. Only I can speak on my behalf. 10 years ago I was 163 kilos. This morning I was 107. I tried diets, but a diet, you go on a diet and you go off a diet, right? So all I did was change my lifestyle completely. And I agree with you. No alcohol, but the simple fact, if you want a simple fact how to lose weight, maintain, keep it off, cut out HI. Now people say to me, what's HI? I've read as many books as I could, because my doctor said there's nothing more I could do with me. I had glomerulonephritis, I had blood pressure through the roof, I could hardly walk. I owned a nightclub. And cut out HI. It's really simple. And you don't need a book, you don't need anything. HI is human interference. It comes in a packet, it's processed, it's anything. It's no good for you. Well, it was no good for me. I don't care about anyone else. I just can tell you what I do. I just eat vegetables, fruit, vegetables, meat, and whatever, all in moderation. And I've been doing that for 5 or 6 years, and I've never felt better, healthier. I'm on a slight tablet for a little bit of blood pressure, but I could easily go off that as well. And I've just cut out. The simple question is cut out HI. That's and I can't do over protein because I've had a kidney problem, and I just blend it in moderation with exercise, and that's all I can say. Good luck, but it can be done.
He's quite correct, you know. As I mentioned earlier, 60% of any supermarket is put over to biscuits and crisps and stuff like that. Processed food is a poison. I wouldn't regard it as a food. Well, I wouldn't regard it as a food. Sugar is a poison. We need sugar, glucose, but we don't need any extra sugar than what is in whole food, whole plants, or if you're a meat eater, eat meat, yeah.
A big thank you to Barry Jones for a wonderfully prepared talk. I mean, your slides were really exemplary. Come over, we got a little bit of a thank you, small plaque. It was a really, really well done talk. Really, thanks again. And we'll have to look to get you back in 6 months or so for one of those other topics.